Hey, welcome back to episode 3 of Disclosures with Nick and Dave. I am Nick Offenkamp, and joining me is my wonderful co-host partner, Dave Miller.
In person for the first time.
That's right. We got the beautiful outdoor ambiance, and lights that were
By no small miracle either. The back end production guys don't get nearly enough credit
No.
on all these sorts of endeavors, movies and podcasts and such.
Yeah. If it was the 45 minutes of monkeying around to just try and get this set up, I have a whole new level of respect for.
Well, absolutely. Right before we started, the box light hit me in the face, so we just took that down and said, you know what, it's all right. We
Yeah.
can just be backlit instead.
Who needs front lighting? No, it's great. And then anytime that you drift back, you go out of focus too. So
Perfect.
that's anyhow. It's
Well,
for anybody listening to the podcast. It's all the same.
Yeah, well, let it be a testament to the fact that our expertise is real estate, not podcast production.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
I agree.
Speaking of real estate, so last week's episode, we got deep into the weeds of the NAR settlement, commissions, incentive misalignments, kind of calling it as we see it within the real estate industry, and ways that we think as an industry it's been set up to serve agents, often at the expense of consumers, which from a business standpoint makes sense, but it's rubbed you and I both wrong for several years and has led to us really re-examining how we want to do business. If you missed that episode, I'd encourage you to check that out if you're really looking for the backstory on, and most agents don't talk about compensation and commission structures. Why do these guys care so much? I think that comes through in the last episode, but this one we want to get a lot more practical about, okay, well, what makes the Tartan team unique? What are we doing? And again, lest this become just like a promotional podcast that's all about us. I think we'll tie it to some of the larger things that we see happening industry-wide with consumer sentiment, to some degree even with like AI. Not that this will be an AI podcast, but
Probably be down the line eventually.
The times they are a-changing.
No doubt.
And we're trying to see around the corner and build something for the future rather than just hold on to what has always been done in the past. And so the biggest area that I think we've really tried to innovate has been on buyer agency. And so for those that kind of missed the last episode, of course, we don't want to totally rehash it, but just to give a bit of context, I'm putting you on the spot, but how, what would you say are the kind of the biggest issues with the traditional way that buyer agency has been done?
Yeah, the most straightforward answer is misalignment between how the buyer agent gets paid and how that aligns to a buyer's goals and in purchasing a house. Boiled down to its most basic, if the buyer's agent gets compensated as a percentage of the sale price of the home, the buyer's agent is going to, on some level, be incentivized to steer his client towards a more expensive house or a house that might have easier conditions for close, something that's a little more surefire, more likely to put the commission check in his pocket.
Yeah. So that's a big piece, right? Like if you as a purchaser of something are hiring somebody to represent you, of course you want them looking out for your best interest, but you're also looking to them to help you negotiate the best deal possible. And with the traditional way that buyer agents are paid, where they get a percentage of the purchase price of the house, well, in order for the buyer agent to negotiate the best deal for you, it means that they're also having to negotiate against themselves. Like they actually get penalized financially for helping you get the best deal. Whereas if you overspend by $100,000, I mean, that could be $2,500, $3,000 swing for that buyer agent. And in the grand scheme of things, like, is that a ton of money, especially when you're, wanting to build a good reputation and live on referrals? No, but the principle still stands of that there's a misalignment here. One of the other things with traditional buyer agent compensation is buyer agents only get paid when a deal closes. And so, what issues does that create?
Yeah, it we'll dive really far into the weeds on this later in this episode, but the the main issue is that some people are going to get a bunch of work done by their agent for free, and then other people are going to be paying for that. And what we mean by that is if you work with an agent, a buyer's agent, and you're only going to pay him once you purchase a house, once that home closes. A lot of people who aren't in the industry might not understand that there's a lot of buyer's agents who spend many days, many late nights, many weekends driving their client around and opening doors and showing them houses, and in a lot of cases writing offers. A lot of them are what we would call in the industry lowball offers. Maybe you have an unrealistic buyer's client, and so you can do all this work as a buyer's agent. And if you're working with a tough client because of their expectations, or maybe they just have a tough situation where they have a very uh, tight window of what they're looking for, and maybe their finances are tight, you can end up doing all this work, and then if they give up because they say, well, I'm not really interested in moving unless it actually makes sense for them. And we wouldn't want to force anyone into moving. But on the flip side, we also wouldn't want to spend, sometimes our agreements, they're 90 days, sometimes they're 6 months. You could spend a lot of time. And then if a home doesn't close, you're out. Like, nothing for the agent, right? Like, you made $0, all that effort. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, you could say, well, they're going to come back to you. I'd say, and I wouldn't venture a guess on any specific numbers because I've never seen it, but in general, our sentiment is if you've been working with us for 6 months and we haven't found something and you're frustrated, we're probably also frustrated, right? Like, is that person really coming back to you when they find maybe they're on Zillow and they see the house that they really want after your 6 month buyer's agency agreement is
Right.
up? And the answer is sometimes yes, but oftentimes they've had enough of you after 6 months, and
Yep.
their frustration, whether it's your fault or not, might boil over into, the human nature of something's not going right and you're looking for someone to blame.
Yeah. And that also can come out, like, again, in just the misalignment of incentives, because after 3-4 months of touring a bunch of homes, and especially if the agent knows that the buyer has like their lease is ending and they've got to make a decision to either renew the lease or purchase something. Well, if the agent's been working with them for 4 months, it can start to, like, the agent can start to feel like, shoot, if I don't get them into a home, I'm getting a big fat goose egg. In fact, I've been working with this agent at a cost for nothing. And so then you can start to feel, as a home buyer, this weird pressure of like, oh, all of a sudden it feels like my agent, who was really helpful up front, is now starting to push me toward a particular home, or they're wanting me to overlook things that at the beginning we weren't overlooking. And this is just human nature, right? Because that agent, even though, yeah, they have a fiduciary responsibility to their client, they're supposed to always act in their client's best interest. Nobody wants to be wasting their time, wasting months and months of work. And it starts to, we've just talked with many home buyers, not clients of mine, but just as I've been kind of talking with people all over the country and hearing their experiences of working with agents, how common it is that agents look back and feel like, wow, I felt like my buyer's agent was starting to get frustrated with me, and I felt like they started to push me towards a home that actually wasn't the ideal fit because they wanted to get paid.
Yeah, absolutely. And to retouch on the NAR lawsuit that we talked about in depth in the last episode, that is oftentimes a lot of those types of circumstances where things don't go the way you want them to go. That is where a lot of those lawsuits came out of, right? Where
Yeah.
you're at 5 months, 2 weeks on a 6-month contract, and the agent is, both parties, or both the buyer and the agent, are beyond fed up with each other, and it's like, all right, well, let's just get something done so it doesn't feel like this whole thing was a waste.
Yep.
And so, and then, a little bit of time goes on, and a lot of buyers are like, no, that was, and rightfully so, they were upset that it felt like the trust that they put in their agent was violated, and that
Yep.
was what a lot of those lawsuits against NAR, that was the reasoning.
Yeah.
That go back to the previous episode to get
To get the
a
full.
more comprehensive breakdown, but that was a huge part, right? Was failure to specifically on the buyer side.
Right.
Not that there weren't issues on seller side, but the lawsuit was specifically more focused on the buyers.
Yeah, the biggest consequences came out like in terms of changes for how buyers operate in the market. And this, goes back to as well, like the idea of buyer agency being free to home buyers, which for the last 3-4 decades, like that's been the pitch of you should work with a buyer's agent because they don't cost you anything. The seller pays for the buyer agent, and just kind of circumventing the entire conversation about compensation. And um, one of the interesting, things is if you go on Reddit or you look at the complaints about real estate commissions, and on the buyer agent side in particular, you'll see the stories of where there's a home buyer that they toured one house. It was $1 million home, a 3% agreement with the buyer agent. The buyer agent got a $30,000 paycheck for, what was maybe 10 hours of work.
Yep.
And it's like, yeah, who doesn't want to be making $3,000 an hour?
That's good money for anyone.
Yeah, that's true. And so then there's the public outcry of that, like that's criminal, right? Like the buyer found the house, and all the agent did was fill out some pre-made forms and send some emails back and forth, and then they got cut a $30,000 check when all was said and done. And that, on one hand, is true. Like that absolutely does happen. But then on the other side, you have a lot of the situations that we were talking about where 6 months of showing house after house after house, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 hours of work that's dumped into a client that never ends up closing. And so what agents will say is they'll say, well, look at the whole, and on average, we make a very reasonable amount. But the problem is with the traditional structure, what's happening is the best clients, those people that are one house, $30,000 check, 10 hours, they are subsidizing all of that work that the agent is doing for free for the clients that don't perform. It's a system that the best clients are penalized, and the worst clients are the ones that get off looking like they're getting free services. And this is one of the big things that we've tried to rethink from a consumer standpoint, right? Because I think I've had those clients where it's just felt like I've had a hard time going to sleep at night because it was such an easy transaction that, if I'm being really honest, it's like, man, I don't know that I provided as much value as I received, and that's not a good feeling. That's not something that either you or I can really live with. Now, of course, there's countless other transactions where it's like, dude, I provided way, way more value than I received in return.
The juice almost wasn't worth the squeeze.
We can drop the almost. It was not. But so then the question was like, well, how do we bring greater parity here? Like, how do we stop penalizing our very best clients and make sure that we're always compensated for the professional services that we render, and that that's not tied exclusively to outcomes in order to create greater fairness, not just for us. Like, I mean, I think any professional would agree they should be compensated fairly for their work, but also make it more fair for the clients that we serve. So the setup here, what's the
Yeah.
the
What are you pulling at, Nick?
yeah. Well, now that you ask,
Yeah.
thank you. The brilliant idea is retainers, which very, very common in.
Yeah, brilliant. And also, we can say that because we're just stealing the idea from multiple other industries, right? The one that probably comes to everyone's mind is the law profession,
Yeah.
foremost. But yes, it it was thought up originally in other industries to solve a similar problem,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
To protect professionals from spending all their time in order to not to get nothing at the end of all their work if there was not a big amount of work, meaning in this case an offer to be written to buy or sell a house. So to put it plainly in its most simplistic terms, and then we'll break it down a little more, the retainer in our model is meant to protect our time for showing houses and any front end work before we would end up potentially writing an offer. So in the instances where clients end up choosing, nah, this doesn't make sense for me, it didn't work with my timeline, they had to re-up their lease, or they decided the finances didn't make sense and they no longer want to move, we're not out the 10, 20, 30, 40 hours of discussions, driving around with clients, meeting clients at houses, or in a lot of cases, say even back in 2021, 22, and 23, when the housing market was much more of a frenzy on the buy side, there's not as much stability as now. I knew agents who were writing 5-6 offers a weekend. I know you had
Right.
a couple clients where you were like, yeah, we wrote 4 offers and not a single one got accepted. Like, that's a significant amount of time and
Yep.
and work to do all that. And so I think anyone, whether or not you think all real estate agents are crooks, whether you hate the whole system, whatever, I think anyone could agree that if you worked on something for 10, 15, or 20 hours and didn't get anything for it, that, like, yeah, that's not a
Yeah.
great deal, right? So that is as you've started alluding to, what the retainer is designed to do. It's designed to help level across, create more of an average income that doesn't favor one buyer that's a pain in the butt. And to say, like, to say it honestly, that is oftentimes the case. There's certain buyer profiles that are really hard to deal with, whether it's the financing, whether it's the person who maybe has a very narrow idea of what they want to buy, or is very set on price. Those sorts of clients, we want to still help them,
Yep.
right? Like, we
Love helping them.
we do. But we
But there's a
also,
higher risk.
That's perfectly said. There is a much higher risk to work with a client like that, and we don't want to punish clients who say, you just had one a couple months ago where somebody came to you and they said, I know the house I want to see, and I already know that I am financially capable of buying it. I just want you to show me the house. And you did, and you wrote the offer, and it was
Got
accepted, and it was
and
great. Those people shouldn't be punished.
Right.
Because there are these people on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So maybe explain a little bit more into what the retainer looks like for us across the different levels of service.
Yeah, I'll get there. There's one more thing that I want to add, because the retainer, I don't think it just protects us and our time. I think that that's an important element. And of course, that's something that we care about. I don't think that that should be a surprise to anybody. But going back to that incentive alignment, I think it's something that our clients really value. I know it's something our clients value because when we give advice, the fact that we have some guaranteed compensation means that we're not incentivized in the same way that a traditional buyer agent is when that buyer agent only gets paid on commission at closing. So go back to that whole situation of where you've been working with a client for 4 months and they got to make the decision to re-sign their lease or move forward on a house. Well, if you get zero compensation as an agent, of course, then you're massively financially incentivized to push them towards buying a house. For us, because of the retainer model, we believe that we have been fairly compensated for our time, such that if the best decision for you is to re-sign the lease and to restart your search later, we're able to say that honestly, candidly, and there's no hard feelings either way about that. And I think that that's when you're hiring a buyer agent to be a trusted advisor, you want for their financial incentives to be as much as possible aligned with your own if you're really going to be able to believe any of the advice that they give. And so by us taking a retainer up front, it's a way of us just saying, hey, we're all bought in here and we're establishing an advisory relationship, not, I mean, commission is the language of sales. And especially with buyer agency, like it is guidance, counsel, advisory more than it is an actual sales position. We're not here, when you're a home buyer, we're not here to sell you a home. We are here to protect your interests throughout the home buying process. That's a really, really big difference and distinction.
Yeah. And it's worth mentioning that there are still many, many ethical agents who work as a on percentage commission. And we think that it is still possible for that to happen, but the reason we've shifted to the flat fee with a retainer is we want sort of the basis state of the business model to resort to protecting the consumer. We don't want a above and beyond level of sacrifice on the agent to be what keeps protection for the consumer top and center. That's why when if you listen to this podcast moving into the future, you're going to hear us continue to talk about alignment of incentives.
Yeah.
We want the way we're pulling and our financial incentive to be in line as much as possible with our clients.
What I hear you saying is that it's like, hey, there are a lot of agents out there with good hearts, but we don't want to be reliant upon the good-heartedness of people. Like
Summed up perfectly.
We can build a better system
absolutely
than that.
Yep.
And that's exactly what we're trying to do. And the big question, right? This is the experiment, is like, well, will consumers will you tolerate the idea of, hey, every other agent in Clark County as a buyer agent, they're not going to charge a retainer to work with them. But if you work with Nick and Dave, like there is a retainer that's up front. Do the trade-offs of having better alignment of incentives, of being able to more wholly trust that we're not financially incentivized to tell you, yeah, this is the home for you. You should move forward on it because we get nothing if you don't buy a home. Like, does all of that make it worth it? And also, we talked about this a little bit in the previous episode, but this is probably a good place to bring in just how the compensation in our model works, because you alluded to how we do flat fee on the buy side. And we have 3 tiers of services. We have full service buyer agency, which is what most people imagine with when you retain or hire a buyer agent, where they're going to set up a search for you, schedule all of your showings, attend those showings with you, give you real-time feedback, attend your inspections, appraisals, of course, write all the offers, negotiations, all of that. So we do that, but instead of it a percentage, it's $15,000 as a flat fee. So, if you're buying a $800,000, $900,000 home, you stand to save several $1,000s compared to most agents that are still working on a percentage only. But with that full service, there's a $3,000 retainer that's due up front. And by and large, that's a non-refundable retainer that just says, hey, we recognize that there's upfront work that Nick and Dave are going to be doing. So we give the 3,000. That gets taken out of the final 15,000 at closing. So it's 15 total. Then the next tier would be a limited service tier, which is it's more or less like virtual buyer agency, like what it.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. Virtual in the sense that, to maybe break down some of the mechanics of it, a huge amount of real estate agents' time is driving to meetings, right?
Yep.
Like, and that may seem a little bit obvious if you think about it, but we we looked at it and we're like, well, if we didn't have to do all this driving around, specifically, let's just to maybe give an example, maybe we have a client who is in the trades or in construction, and they know quite a bit about houses, and they don't feel like they need our expertise in advising them on, what's the difference about a home that was built in the 90s versus the 2000s. Well, what are we really doing for them at that point?
Right.
Where the in-person meeting, we're flinging a door open, and then they're going to look at it, and they're going to feel very confident in assessing what they're looking at from the physical standpoint, right? Of, what does the actual feel of the house look like? Where we can really help that buyer is being able to look at the neighborhood and the larger geographical area and really give them discernment on pricing and how to sort of the more back end side of what people think about as what a real estate agent is doing.
Yep.
We looked at it, and we wanted there to be an option for people who don't want to pay to have us drive to every appointment with them and open a door if they feel confident that they know what they're looking at.
Yep. Yeah, with the kind of traditional one size fits all model, like for buyer agents, like most of the time is spent opening doors and driving to appointments on houses that you might spend 15 minutes in, and then it's like, well, that's not the one for me, and so then it's another 20-30 minute car drive to the next one. And if you look at 6 or 7 homes on a Saturday, like that can easily be an 8-hour day.
Yep.
And to your point, like for some buyers, that having the agent there in person, absolutely really valuable. But for many buyers, they feel like, yeah, I've bought several homes. I've got some construction know-how. Like I've done remodeling, renovation projects before. And so they feel like, yeah, I would be more than happy to tour a home without Nick or Dave with me going to open houses. We've got a few other creative ways that we can get you into the home with kind of like a Uber-esque service for real estate agents. But where Dave and I add the most value in the transaction is in that judgment layer. And usually that comes out in negotiations and making sure that you're fully protected legally with the offer, the contract, the back and forth. So anyhow, it's $9,000 for the limited service model, $1,500 retainer. And then we've got like a non-agency DIY where it's like if you want to do the whole process yourself, but you just want somebody that has local expertise. Yeah, exactly. Sounding board. Then we do consulting at it's $450 an hour, and it's as you need it. And just check in with us, and we'll kind of help stress test your thinking and offer guidance. But there's no agency relationship in that tier. So those are the mechanics, and that those retainers we take for the full service and limited service tiers. We take those at the time of signing a buyer agency agreement. And sometimes people start with limited service, and then it's like, you know what, I actually do want you to be there for all of the showings. And so, there's some movement every now and again. And because it's still a highly relational like business, this isn't an area where it's like, you just go on our website and you choose your level of service and plug in your credit card number and
No, yeah,
then you
yeah,
pertain to us. Like all of this happens in the context of conversation. But with the retainer, the reason that we are able to charge a flat fee rather than a percentage in both the full service and the limited service, and the reason that that can be more financially efficient without losing any sort of judgment or expertise, but still becomes more financially efficient for many consumers, is because the retainer model means that we are always being compensated something for our time. So we are not having to penalize our best clients in order to make up for or compensate ourselves for the time that we spent with people that never moved forward. And so for our best clients, like they really do realize several $1,000s worth of savings without any of the trade-offs in like the kind of judgment or expertise that they're getting from us, because the retainer model allows for that. Like we have that sort of financial basis and cash flow into our business that we don't have to squeeze everybody for every dollar of commission that we could possibly get.
yeah. That's right. The one of the one of the, we as we've tested this theory and bounced it off of other people who are experienced home buyers, other people in the industry. One of the issues that we're running up against is there is a real instance in which a lot of people who are first-time home buyers are looking at the cost of the retainer, and specifically buyers who are hoping to finance the most of the cost of the home purchase into their loan. And that is something we're still working through, as what does the option look like for a first-time home buyer to be able to come up with the money to pay our retainer. And that's something that is a issue we're still working out. And I guess the thought I'm having here is, if the retainer seems like a huge hurdle for you, you can always talk to us, right?
Right.
Like Nick said, this isn't swipe your credit card and this is it, right? Like, this is, if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I like what these guys are saying, a lot of this makes sense, but $3,000 feels like a lot of money. And I was, a lot of people are, with the rates being where they're at, are already reaching to be able to afford a home in general, right? So it's worth mentioning, just to say, this is how we're hoping the business is set up. And we think there's a lot of good reasons to both for protection of ourselves, but also protection of the consumer. But if this feels like a hurdle, like, we're just going to, I really wanted to work with you guys, but I just don't think I can front $3,000 plus the down payment for a home purchase. Give us a call. We're willing to work with people, but in general, this podcast, this episode is meant to give an overview of why we're hoping the industry is going to shift more towards a model that's similar to this, so that there is an alignment between our goals and our clients' goals.
Yeah. And it's funny, like in this industry, you can kind of be penalized for trying to be more transparent about pricing. What I mean by that is, by us being candid about it's $15,000 flat fee for full service with a $3,000 retainer that's collected up front. One of the reactions that I've gotten from a few people is just that, like, well, that sounds expensive. And that's a fair, like, it's not a cheap professional service and don't pretend otherwise. And that's something that's worth a conversation of like, okay, well, what's the value that's provided? And of course, there's a lot of different directions that we can talk about that. Certainly, in protecting your interests, the negotiations, we usually do find that we are bringing more value to our clients than what we are actually collecting, which again, we feel really good about. But there's sort of a sleight of hand of where, for most traditional agents, 2.5% sounds a lot less expensive than $15,000. It's a psychological kind of thing, even though 2.5% on $1 million home is 25 grand, you know? And so that just to make like the math really plain, one on our website, thetartanteam.com, you can play around with the calculators with full service and limited service and see, like compared to a traditional agent, how our fees stack up. But let's just say that you're buying $1 million home because the math is easy and you are working with us. Well, that let's just say that the seller's offering a 2.5% commission to a buyer's agent. What we're able to do because of that $15,000 agreement that we have is we're able to, in our negotiations, get you that $10,000 difference between what we're being compensated and what the seller is offering to pay, and negotiate that to your benefit of $10,000 off of the purchase price, $10,000 in additional closing cost credits, making your offer $10,000 more attractive than any other offer on the table without any additional expenses from you. And so to this whole idea of like, buyer agency is free to the buyer. We're being explicit that no, it's not, and it never has been. However, because most sellers are willing to give a credit or compensation to help compensate the buyer agent, by having a more affordable buyer agent team, we're able to leverage that to help you see a real return. Whereas most agents, while it might sound cheaper at 2.5% paid for by the seller, you could actually be paying or unrealizing $10,000 difference. And if that feels and sounds convoluted, unfortunately, that's kind of by design with the way that this industry has operated for the past few decades. And so by trying to turn a light onto that and say, yeah, we're actually wanting to be more transparent about this.
Yeah, and if any of that didn't make sense, we dug into the mechanics of the transaction and kind of the why the industry landed where it did in the last episode. So
Yeah.
if that's sort of high level summary, but your point that it changing the model is an uphill battle, right? One, because we are asking sellers to come up with more money.
Or buyers.
Sorry,
Yeah.
yes, you're correct. We're asking our buyer clients to come up with more money on the front end of the transaction. And we believe that the savings we offer by being flat fee and the potential huge savings that could be realized from having aligned incentives is in most cases going to be more than the $3,000 retainer. And if the math, if we haven't explained any of this well enough and the math sounds convoluted, and you're thinking about buying a house, we'd be happy to explain it, over a call. And if you're listening remote and you're like, I'm never going to work with these guys, I guess the thing we're hoping people take from this is that you understand the mechanics of the transaction. You understand what the legacy system or model of real estate agency was, and hopefully in your circumstance can maybe negotiate yourself a better deal, right? And that's something we said in the last episode, which was, if there's one thing to take out of this, it's that you don't have to just take what the guy who, oh yeah, my aunt used a guy and he was good, and he says, well, he's not going to do it for any less than 2.75%. right? It is 100% negotiable, and not enough agents are clear on that. And we want to negotiate not just a better price, we want the mechanics of it and the alignment to be better. That's what the whole Tartan team model got started on, and that's what we're hoping to push forward,
Yeah.
not primarily for our own gain, but primarily for the consumer's gain, and hopefully also make the industry better and more even across the board for buyers agents.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that people who see flat fee could initially just think, "Oh, these guys are discount brokers," and that's been used as a label to malign just the cheapos within the industry that usually underperform when it comes to negotiation or expertise, and corny, cheesy, terrible. We're not actually here to compete fundamentally on price. That's an easy game to play, but usually, like the old adage of that you get what you pay for, in some ways that tends to be true. Um, but what we're actually here to compete on is we want to be the most aligned in terms of incentives. We want to be the most trusted as advisors in the home buying process. And in order to do that, we have to rethink the compensation model. And so it's not that we're just here to merely compete on price. Price is always an important factor, but we're really competing on trust.
Yeah, and I guess I maybe as I'm thinking back about how we've talked about this, I think the major part of the retainer that a consumer should take away is the willingness their agent would or could have to negotiate against their own interest,
Yeah.
right? Of There's a agent back in Minneapolis where I'm from who is very high performing. He does a lot of sales, and everybody loves working with him. And he was the agent of a very close friend of mine. And I asked him, I said, "What do you like about this agent?" He says, "He's the guy who tells you no. He tries to talk you out of buying a house when you're walking it with him. He tries to make sure you see everything that's wrong, instead of just saying, well, yeah, okay, maybe there's some water in the basement, but look at the granite on the countertop, right? It's beautiful." And that might seem a little cartoonish in terms of how blatant that is. Any consumer could see that sort of example, and I say that to illustrate, but the fact of the matter is the steering is usually a lot more subtle.
Yeah.
And unless you're an experienced home buyer, you might not even realize that your agent who walks in hundreds or thousands of homes a year is just, yeah, let's just get this one over with,
Yeah.
right? Let's just close this deal so I can get my commission and move on.
Yeah.
And that's what we don't want.
Exactly. Yeah, super, super well said. So hopefully that's clear. If there are questions, as Dave made the invitation, like we'd love to chat about these things. Certainly, if you're looking to buy in Clark County, Southwest Washington, that's where we live, work, play. We'd love to serve you. But even if you're out of state or you're somebody in the industry and you're just like trying to think through these things, we care about these conversations. And if you're looking to get connected with an agent that kind of shares a similar ethos, we're not the only ones. There are others that are thinking along the same sort of lines, trying to challenge the status quo. And if we can be a conduit to help connect you to some of those like-minded folks in your area, we'd love the privilege to be part of that as well. So thanks for coming along in this week's episode. If you haven't already, make sure that you have subscribed to the show, and we'll catch you in the next one.